Hello, we are now going to look at the second part of the moral philosophy course in the spec, which is metaethics. Okay, and metaethics can be contrasted with normative ethics in that it's not about what is right and wrong and finding out about what is right and wrong. It's just about what takes place when we make a moral judgment. Okay, so are moral judgments, for example, just deeply held expressions of feeling, or are they something more than that? Are there moral facts that exist irrespective of what we happen to think? So just a quick overview of what's in the spec first before we look at our first theory, which will be A.J. Ayer's emotivism. All right. So yeah, the idea is that we look at the origins of moral principles, reason, emotion, attitudes, or society. All right. We'll be looking at the distinction between cognitivism and non-cognitivism in relation to the kind of ethical language that we use. And as I mentioned just now, we'll be exploring two sides of meta-ethical argument: moral realism and moral irrealism. And moral realism, as is suggested by the name, is the idea that there are mind-independent moral facts that exist no matter what we happen to think. Okay? Moral irrealism, on the other hand, is the idea that there are no mind-independent moral facts and that in one way or another, moral judgments are just down to what humans think. All right? And within all of this, here are some of the theories that we'll be looking at. Moral naturalism and moral non-naturalism. Both these can be counted in one way or another as realist theories. Hume's idea that you cannot derive an ought from an is. That's an irrealist idea. We'll be looking at John Mackey's argument from relativity and his arguments from queerness. This is essentially an irrealist position and encompasses error theory as well. And we'll then be looking at emotivism and prescriptivism. Okay, I'm actually going to be starting with emotivism because it does make a good starting point for the rest of what we're going to look at. So as I said just now, metaethics is the study of the nature of moral judgments, not about what is right and wrong. Okay, studying what is right and wrong is the realm of normative ethics, which you'll look at theories such as utilitarianism, Kant's deontological approach, and Aristotle's virtue ethics. As a general rule, and this is just something that you need to think of as we're going through our meta-ethical theories, you cannot criticize a meta-ethical theory with a normative ethical claim. For example, you can't say that emotivism is wrong just because it allows someone to say that sexism is acceptable. All right? Because, of course, if emotivism is true and moral judgments are just deeply held expressions of feeling or attitudes, then trying to criticize emotivism by saying that sexism is acceptable is just your opinion. All right, so bear that general rule in mind, and we'll come back to it. So if you don't understand it fully right now, don't worry. All right, our main job in metaethics is to try to show whether a particular theory is true or false. Okay, and one can't necessarily do that by just making normative claims about the theory itself. Okay, so let's look at some key terms to begin with. Two fundamental key terms, right? Subjective and objective. A moral claim, or any claim come to that, is subjective if it is based in opinion as opposed to being factual. So, for example, I might say that the monarchy is an outdated institution. All right, that's my opinion. All right, but it's not a fact It can't be proved either true, and it can't be proved false. It is literally just my opinion of the facts. All right, so it's a subjective claim. All right. A claim, by contrast, is objective if it can be established as true or false independently of any opinion. So, for example, I might claim that the Earth is flat. This is my opinion, but I'm wrong, right? There is an objective fact of the matter. The Earth is not flat, it is in fact round. All right. Now, the terms subjective and objective really go hand in hand with two other important terms that you need to know, those of cognitivism and non-cognitivism. Now, cognitivism basically suggests that the function of moral statements or moral propositions in which right, wrong, and ought are used describes a realm of moral facts. All right? So cognitivism is essentially objective. All right? Those moral facts exist independently of our subjective thoughts and feelings about things. All right? So, in essence, cognitivism can be linked with objectivism. All right? So, moral statements can accordingly be thought of as objectively true or false. You might make the link, for example, with Kantian ethics in cases such as never breaking promises. Kant believes that there are ways in which you can establish that breaking a promise is morally wrong, irrespective of what you as a human being, as an individual, happen to think about it. All right? But please have a look at the deontological lesson to find out more about that. All right. Now, non-cognitivism, on the other hand, can more or less be linked to moral subjectivity. So, moral statements or moral claims express nothing more than our thoughts and feelings and attitudes. Okay, rather like my monarchy example. All right. It just expresses my thoughts about the monarchy. It doesn't say anything factual. All right. And moral non-cognitivism or moral subjectivism states that moral claims cannot be thought of as true or false. There's nothing mind-independent to which they refer. All right. Unlike the case of the flat earther, who is just plain wrong, because there are facts that you can refer to that exist independently of what we happen to think. So then the ultimate question is morality subjective or objective? And here we're just going to look at some moral questions. All right. For example, is racism objectively wrong? Now, pretty much everybody, I think, is going to say, yes, it is wrong. All right. Now, as soon as you've made that kind of commitment, you're trying to establish where the fact is in relation to this claim. So what might make racism objectively wrong? What might make saying that racism is wrong a fact? All right. Similarly, are gender pay gaps objectively right? Most people would say that they are not right. But the question again is, how do you prove it? If morality is nothing more than subjective, can you prove it at all? Right? And the same would go for the racism question. Thirdly, if it is wrong to steal from me, then is it wrong for me to steal from you? How do you work this out? All right? Is it just subjective, that's what I think? Or is there some fact to which we can appeal that says that if it is wrong to steal from me, then it's just as wrong for me to steal from you? All right? So that's where we are, and I would like you I'll just go back to that slide for a moment. Just have a look at those questions, all right? Pause the video and write down what you think is the case, right? Is racism objectively wrong? In other words, is it a fact that racism is wrong, or is it just subjective opinion that people have. There is no actual fact of the matter. So think about all of these questions, pause the video, and maybe take 5 or 10 minutes to answer them. A few sentences for each question will suffice. Now let's begin our look at moral irrealism and realism. Okay, so once again, just to emphasize the point, irrealism is the idea that moral claims are subjective, they're non-cognitive, there is no fact of the matter to which we can appeal that exists independently of our own opinions. And realism, the clues in the name, suggests that there are such things as moral facts. Morality is real, irrespective of what we happen to think. Okay? So those are some things that you might want to say about moral irrealism. If you've got a 3-mark question, for example, that said describe moral irrealism, those are 3 things that you could say about it. Similarly, with realism, there are another 3 things that you can say about it. All right. Make sure as well that you do always have facts to back up the claims that you make. All right. So let's now move on to our first irrealist moral theory, that of emotivism. All right. And emotivism was developed mainly by A.J. Ayer and supported by Charles Stevenson. All right, but it's mainly Ayer that we'll be looking at. Now, Ayer's version of emotivism was based on what is known as the verification principle. The verification principle was developed by a group of philosophers known as the logical positivists. Ayer was a big fan of logical positivism, and the principle basically is the idea that a statement is only meaningful if it can be shown to be true or false either through experience or through logical analysis. All right? Now, Ayer's claim, as we'll see in a moment, is that you cannot verify or falsify, that is, you can't say that a statement is true or false either through experience or logical analysis when it comes to morality. You just can't do it. You can do it in science, but you can't do it in the realm of ethics. All right, so he believes instead that moral judgments are nothing more than expressions of deep-seated attitudes or feelings. And for that reason, it's sometimes known as the boo-hurrah theory. So emotivism is sometimes known as the boo-hurrah theory because you might say, for example, I don't know, killing, boo, giving to charity, hurrah. Okay, so that may also be a helpful way of remembering it. So moral judgments, as I said just now, are meaningless because they cannot be verified either by definition, either through logical analysis, or through empirical or observational means. Okay, so if, for example, I say it is sunny outside, that is a statement that can either be shown to be true or false through experience or through observation. Either it's sunny or it's not. Okay. A truth of logic, for example, might be a triangle has 3 sides, because if you look at that statement, has 3 sides is internal to the concept of a triangle. Similarly, you might say, for example, all bachelors are unmarried men. Okay, it's the same thing. You can just find out that it's true, not through experience, just by looking at the logic of the sentence. All right. So, looking at some more key points in relation to emotivism, we can all, for example, agree about when an event occurred and what took place. All right, so we can say that the fight took place at this time, it occurred in this particular place, and X number of people witnessed the fight. But we do not all agree on the ethical aspects of that event. Okay, so the natural features are the features that we can all agree on. Okay, natural features is a key term here. that Ayer uses. That's the when it took place, who witnessed it, who was involved, maybe why it took place if you're thinking about motives. Okay, all of those things are natural features, but the ethical aspects are not natural features because not everyone will agree on what they are. Okay, whereas everyone will agree on where it took place, when it took place, and so on. Okay, so people agree on natural features, but they don't agree on the moral aspects of things. And so, moral judgments are merely expressions of how we feel about the natural features, hence boo hurrah. All right. Now, there are a few objections here, and I'm sure you've already thought of some yourself. All right, well, I'll just go through a few of them. This whole sort of idea that morality is just like boo hurrah, all right, seems to trivialize things. It makes it no more than a matter of taste. So it might be, for example, that you like the Beatles and I like the Rolling Stones, and we're saying that morality is basically on a level with that. Okay, it's just a matter of taste. And so that seems to suggest that Ayer might be mistaken in this particular theory, because morality seems to matter a lot more than taste in music. But on his account, there doesn't seem to be much difference. They're just equally just matters of taste. All right. It also means there's no real possibility of meaningful moral dialogue. In other words, you and I might disagree, but all we're really disagreeing about is how we feel. There's no more substance to it than that. And of course, if your emotions are involved, you don't have to be consistent. All right. You might, for example, be against gay marriage and against racism, but there you can be inconsistent, because of course you might argue that being racist is to deny recognition of the humanity of your victim, but not sort of be critical to the same degree in relation to gay marriage. All right, that's inconsistent. If you are trying to recognise the humanity in somebody else, then it would be consistent to say that you should not be racist and be also in favour of gay marriage. Perhaps even more trivially, you might, because your emotions are unreliable, your emotions can change from one day to the next. You might go to bed being anti-racism or anti-racist, and then get up the following morning and think there's nothing particularly wrong with it. And the same, of course, goes for gay marriage. So there seems to be a lot of things that can be said against Ayer's emotivism. All right? And perhaps one of the more fundamental objections is that the verification principle that Ayer uses to try to support emotivism, the idea that a statement is meaningless if it can't be shown to be true or false either through observation or logical analysis, that very idea cannot itself be shown to be true or false either through observation or through logical analysis. All right. Now, Ayer's version of emotivism, as I say, because it relies on this verification principle, it's actually undermined by its own criteria. Now, Stevenson thought there was still something to emotivism, but recognised that Ayer's version of it had a problem. So he said, well, look, moral language is just language that's intended to persuade. It's supposed to manipulate your emotions. And so when you're talking about something being right or wrong, you are in essence just trying to manipulate the person that you are trying to convince if they disagree with you. All right. So unlike Ayer, Stevenson claims that moral statements are meaningful because they can persuade. However, all right and good aren't always emotive terms. All right. If I say giving to charity is good, that doesn't really provide much in the way of sort of persuasive motivation for giving to charity. You might just ask me, well, why? All right? So Stevenson can be questioned here by saying, well, look, right and good aren't always emotive terms. They're not particularly persuasive. All right? And Stevenson here might have confused use with meaning. All right? And a sense of someone's rationality in weighing up which feelings or attitudes to relinquish and which to retain is missing. So if I have particular feelings about the gender pay gap, for example, which feelings should I take notice of and which feelings should I ignore? All right, how do I make the decision if all of it is just emotive? Okay, so there seems to be a sense in which all of this is entirely arbitrary. All right, there's no sense of certain attitudes leading to a better life than others. It's just a matter of how we feel. All right. And at this point, I will just re-emphasize the fact that there is some additional reading attached to this lesson. I've also attached some practice questions for you to have a go at, and trying to write out coherently the material that we have covered in relation to whatever question you are asked. All right. So that's more or less it from here. The next theory that we will look at is that of prescriptivism, and I will try to explain how it is that prescriptivism maintains an irrealist perspective but tries to overcome some of these big objections to emotivism.